Thank you for connecting today. Let me begin by welcoming heads of delegation and members of the Bureau who are participating in a meeting of the Standing Committee for the first time. We look forward to seeing you in person soon. I would like to ask you first to adapt the agenda for this meeting. The draft has been circulated. I would suggest that we also discuss the call for action initiative after the report of the Secretary General and before item 5. Can we adopt the agenda? The agenda is adopted. Thank you. Number 2, report of the President of OSCE. We first begin with my report. Per usual practice, I propose that we group any questions or remarks regarding my report or the reports of the Treasurer and the Secretary General at the end of the item 4. A written report has already been made available. And let me just highlight a few issues. I have just returned yesterday from a week-long trip to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. I was glad to be able to see several of you in Tashkent for our election observation mission. And I would also like to mention here that a thank you for the leadership of the election mission to Vice President Reinhold Lopatka, who served as Special Coordinator, and to Vice President Daniela de Ridier, who served as head of the OSCE. Immediately after the mission, Vice President Pia Kauma and I participated in meetings with the parliamentary leadership and the foreign minister to take stock on the cooperation between Uzbekistan and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. We appreciated the very good working relationship we enjoy with the Parliament of Uzbekistan. And this was an opportunity to discuss ways we can further strengthen our ties and support the country in implementing reforms. Our visit to Central Asia also took place in the context of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan during the summer. We had fruitful discussions on the security challenges emanating from Afghanistan and the stabilizing role that Uzbekistan plays in this context. It should be noted that Uzbekistan has been a partner in facilitating evacuations and in assisting the international community to deliver humanitarian aid to the Afghan people. Uzbekistan's role is also crucial to ensure that the Taliban live up to their commitments to prevent and suppress terrorism and protect the fundamental rights and freedoms of all Afghans, especially women and girls. Afghanistan was also a main topic for discussion in Dushanbe, given that Tajikistan shares the longest border with Afghanistan, 1,400 kilometers. I found it very important to visit the country in order to hear concerns and provide adequate support from OSCE. As we approach the winter seasons, there are serious concerns that we are facing a large-scale humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. This has many security implications for our participating states in Central Asia and beyond. Further instability in Afghanistan can exponentially increase refugees flows and provide more fertile grounds for violent extremism and terrorism. I look forward to hear debate on this topic tomorrow. In Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, we had the opportunity to visit OSCE field operations and learn about the great work our organizations does on the ground. Just last Friday, we traveled south of Dushanbe to visit the Women's Resource Center. That center is part of a nationwide established part by the OSCE program office in Dushanbe, which offers community-based vocational training and counseling for survivors of domestic violence. Our visit there was a very vibrant reminder of the concrete impact the OSCE has on the lives of many citizens in the region. We must therefore all that we can do to safeguard this key aspect of the OSCE. In this context, I am troubled by the closure of the observation mission at the Russian checkpoints and the continued impediments to the work of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. The SMS's freedom of movement must be unconditionally respected so the mission can continue to deliver impartial and transparent monitoring and reporting on the security situation in eastern Ukraine. I am closely following these developments and I discussed them on phone with the chief minister of SMM in Ukraine this week. I have highlighted the situation when I visited Kyiv in the beginning of October. Among high-level meetings, I spoke at a seminar about women's participation in SMM organized by the OSCE chairmanship. I'm sorry. Ensuring that OSCE field operations are protected and their staff well cared for requires greater political support by all participating states. To do so, we must continue to engage in parliamentary debates about the work of our organization, and we must carry on questioning our government about the implementation of their commitments. On October 4th, I traveled with Chairperson in office Anne Linde to Bosnia-Herzegovina. Cooperation between our different OSCE bodies is important, and I intend to work for further strengthening and promoting exercises like this. These are some message that I have passed on the leadership for our national parliaments at the Speakers' Conference held in Vienna and in Athens in September and October. I also look forward to support from your delegations to generate this political attention in your capitals. Of course, I took part in several other activities as president of the OSCE. Let me mention one more important matter. Our friends at UDIR just celebrated their 30th anniversary. The cooperation and relations between our organizations is strong and fruitful. And it was with true pleasure I congratulated them in Warsaw some weeks ago. At the same time, I regret that the 2021 Human Dimension meeting could not take place. Let us discuss what we as parliamentarians can do on these matters. We must always remember and come back to the core principles of the Helsinki Final Act and the Paris Charter. The values of these agreements are threatened, and it is our duty to find answers from security matters to the ones that are addressed these days on climate changes at the high-level meeting in Glasgow. As parliamentarians, we can never rest on past victories. Fundamental values of the OSCE dimension are threatened and must be defended. I am determined to work together with you, members of our Assembly, in order to strengthen our work and achievement in the three dimensions. Dear members of the Standing Committee, our work is of great importance for the hundreds of millions, nearly 1 billion of people living in the OSCE region. Lastly, I will talk about the Call for Action project that was decided by former President George Tsereteli. The project received further inclusion by President Lord Bowness, and I intend to continue the work strengthening the political leadership on this matter. I am glad that Ambassador Sanier, responsible advisor for the project, is participating today. I would sincerely like to thank you heads of delegations, senators, and members of parliament. Thank you to the members of the Bureau and the special representatives. The work you all do makes true changes for a prosperous OSCE region. Lastly, I would like to thank our Secretary General Roberto Montel and his staff for their professional and devotion in their work for the Assembly. As we are quite limited for time, let me conclude these highlights here. You can find more details about these and other activities in my written report, as well as through the press release published on the OSCE PA website. I look forward to your questions and comments, which we will group together after item 4. Thank you very much. And by this, can we leave number 2? Thank you. Number 3, report of the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Peter Jensen. Mr. Peter Jensen, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam President, and so nice to see you. It sounds like you have been very busy, so it is nice for all of us to see that you are in good health and keep up the good work. Dear colleagues, I'm very happy to see you all, even though it's through my computer screen. I hope this will be one of the last meetings we are going to have online. Hopefully next year we will go back to normal. It is very important for our assembly and for our political work that we meet in person. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected our work, but we are financially healthy as reflected in our financial situation. I thank the Standing Committee for approving the proposed budget endorsed by the Bureau last July. Of course, I took very good note of the concerns raised by our French delegation, and I assure you that our budget for this financial year ensures that the Assembly will continue to function in an effective way. Let me just underline that the financial resources saved last year once again become an extra contribution from the International Secretariat to all over budget of the Assembly. You can say it is from all of us to all of us. Also, once again, we froze the international contributions to the Assembly to exact same amounts as for year 2019 and 2020 financial year. I believe this is a fair, a clear and an honest way to help our parliaments and our Assembly in times of economic crisis, because it is not easy in our home countries to make sure that you have the economy to provide for your people and your country during a pandemic. I will work hard with our Secretary General and his very good staff to present to the Bureau in April a balanced budget proposal for the next year. Madam President, dear colleagues, our full financial independence from the OSCE structures makes us a flexible, reliable, and a very good institution. It is my objective that also the objective of the Secretariat that the management of our budget reflects the efforts of all our parliaments to reduce expenses whenever we use our taxpayers' money. I welcome and I'm very happy to receive your questions and comments in line with our policy of full transparency and accountability. I appreciate your trust and your support. Let me conclude by expressing my gratitude to the parliaments of UK and Bulgaria that will be hosting us in 2022. Once again, thank you for your support and the support of all our parliaments. Thank you.
Peter Jensen, and can we finalize number 3 by this? Thank you. Let's go further on to the report of the Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Montella. I would like to give the floor to Secretary General Roberto Montella for his report. Please, the floor is yours, Secretary General.
Dear members of the Standing Committee, dear leaders of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, my written report was distributed. So I would like on this occasion to do something different from what I normally do on the Standing Committee or at the annual session, which is namely to paint a list of all the successes that this Parliamentary Assembly has obtained in the reporting period. Indeed, there are many successes to celebrate. There are many good things that we have achieved in the last period. But I don't think I would be doing my job properly if on this occasion I would leave myself only to list all the successes that we have obtained. And so for once, and in full transparency, which is a trademark of my style, I would like to share with you two general concerns that I have for the future of this assembly. One concern is of a political nature, and another concern is more of an administrative nature, which is more linked to my role as a chief administrative officer of this assembly, and which gives me the responsibility to ensure sustainability and effective management of all of our activities. And so I come first to the political challenge. In July, I thanked Gustavo, Odile, and all our conference team. We managed to have indeed a first statutory meeting in person with only the members of the standing committee. But indeed, it was a success that finally we could meet in person and we could see each other and talk to each other. And we called it a success. We called it a success indeed because for a long time we had not met in person, so we could do that. But if I were to be honest with you, I would look in depth to this meeting and say that it was a success for the fact that the meeting took place. But the fact that for the general debate, we had to take away the floor from 54 members signed up to speak and could not speak in a general debate because we spent 3 hours discussing procedural issues and interpretation of our rules of procedures on what are the different and diverging interpretation of some aspects of our rules of procedures. I think this didn't do good to the main trademark of this assembly, which remains a forum for dialogue. And on that occasion, we did not use it really for a forum for dialogue. We discussed the rules of procedures, which, and this is one of my first message, a priority is indeed to address the rules of procedures in the coming years. We have to fix this. We have to be able to provide this assembly with a tool for indeed do what it should be doing, which is a forum for dialogue. And indeed to have debates, which sometimes can be diverging debates. We can have different opinions. We can have open, frank, maybe harsh debate. But this is something that has to happen in our midst, and we cannot take away the floor to 54 parliamentarians who had signed up to speak in the assembly, just because we had to discuss rules of procedure. Another aspect of the Vienna meeting was the election of the new leadership of the Parliamentary Assembly. It was a challenge for us to do it online. And again, here, I think it was a success that we managed to carry out this election online. Technically, the election was a success. It also provided an assembly which, if you look at the outcome of the elections, pretty much divided into two. And I think when an assembly, also from a political point of view, comes out with this kind of setting, it calls on also the Secretariat to step up and ensure that in this assembly, the dialogue and the function of this assembly, which is facilitating dialogue between 57 countries based on mutual respect, working to find as many points of convergence as possible while upholding all common values and commitments. In this regard, it's very important that the Parliamentary Assembly Secretariat ensures that there is as much as possible respect, mutual respect, and points of convergence within our assembly. This is my first concern, so the political future of this assembly, keeping it as a good forum for dialogue. And you probably know that there are not many forums for dialogue left in today's geopolitical scene. So this is a special tool that we have here in the Parliamentary Assembly. We have to treasure it and strengthen it. Now I come to the administrative challenge, which is more pertaining to my role as the Chief Administrative Officer of this Assembly. I must say I'm very proud of all the activities that we are conducting. When I was elected Secretary General in 2015, I took over from January 2016. I made it a point of my tenure to increase the activities of this assembly. This assembly, until that time, mainly held the 5 statutory meetings, some election observation activities, and sometimes presidential activities or some conferences, but there was not a great engagement of all the members of this assembly. You will see from a charter that we have produced, and Angelica will distribute it now in the chat, and it will be distributed to you by email later on. that from 2016, we have increased our activity, also focusing on the geopolitical challenges of our times: climate change, movement of people, migration, fighting against terrorism, conflict prevention. My colleagues will share this graphic, and you will see how many members are actually involved, not only the leadership, but also ordinary members involved in our activities. Recently, the President mentioned this meeting in Athens for Speakers of Parliament. At the margins of the Speakers of Parliament meeting, there is also a meeting for Secretary Generals of Parliament. And in this meeting, many of your Secretary Generals of your Parliament told me, Roberto, but in your assembly, we see that you have exponentially increased your activities. You've probably opened the Pandora's box of creating a lot of activities for members who indeed appreciate the possibility to be engaged in other activities outside of the statutory meeting and election observation missions. So I say to you, yes, indeed, I am guilty as charged. I have opened the Pandora's box in 2016 by trying to increase as much as possible the activities of this assembly to all members. But I think we have reached a moment when we have to take a moment of reflection here and look at what are we doing, try to prioritize what we're doing, and trying to balance what we do between east and west of Vienna, and ensuring a prevalence of quality over quantity. We should not make the mistake of becoming an assembly a la carte, I would call it, where I have an issue, I see that the Secretariat is ready to step in and support me, so I decide to do an initiative on a place or another, because there are structures in this assembly, there are special representatives, there is leadership, which has a mandate to do some activities, but all these activities can only be coherent if they are discussed with the Secretariat, if the Secretariat can provide proper support, proper advice, proper logistics in order to implement them in a qualitative manner. But if every member would like to do some activity, and again, I am not suggesting that we should reduce activities. I welcome that members have the enthusiasm to carry out activities, but those that are activities that we would call OSCPA mandated activities have to be discussed with the Secretariat, have to be planned together with the Secretariat. Otherwise, they become a set of activities which are out of a general plan that we have. And mind you, we have a lot of activities that we plan together with the OSCE executive structures with an idea of bringing an added parliamentary value to the activities of the OSCE. And so this is what we should always keep in mind, which is the context where we operate. So less of an assembly a la carte, let's say, and more of an assembly which makes a priority of what are the main things that we want to do from now until July. And let's try to use the energy of the Secretariat, which is big, I must say. We have here in this room some of my colleagues. We have a Secretariat which really puts a lot of effort in what we do. You have interacted with my colleagues. They have a lot of enthusiasm. They have a lot of professionality. But this amount of activities, we managed to carry them out thanks to the fact that we request from them to go the extra mile. But this is something that I request from them. I have hired colleagues here who have indeed a special enthusiasm for the work we do, but I cannot stretch as much as possible the human resources that we have and also the financial resources. You've heard the treasurer. So we are limited in the number of people we have here at the Secretariat. So the activities that we decide to carry out have to be very well, carefully thought of. So I think that from now onwards, you will hear sometimes this Secretariat do something that is very much not in my nature, because you know me, I'm always trying to accommodate everyone. But for once, you will hear sometimes from the Secretariat that we say no to something, or that it is not possible to carry out something. I know it's a surprise to some of you, but this is the reality we are dealing with. But Angelica, please do forward in the chat the graph, which shows a little bit the figures, also the numbers. I distributed my written report. I will not go into the details of the written report now, but just a few highlights. You've seen on election observation since the summer. We've had an election observation in Bulgaria, in Uzbekistan, and in Moldova. And we are now working on the election observation in Kyrgyzstan. Unfortunately, it was not possible to carry out the election observation in Russia for reasons that you've seen in the letter of the President to the entire Standing Committee in September. One of the activities I'm mostly proud of, and was mentioned also in your report, Madam President, is the call for action, Helsinki Plus 50. I think this is a great project that we have within the Parliamentary Assembly, which is a project to relaunch the political attention to this organization, which does, and not only the OSCE, but the OSCE as such. An organization that does a lot of great work in the field, great work in all its institutions, but it's very well known from those who are recipients of the OSCE products. But the ministers and those who are the boss of this organization have little attention to it. So I think we need to bring the organization in the radar screen of ministers, and the project that Lamberto Zanier is carrying out on the auspices of the Bureau does just that. And I'm going to give you the floor, Ambassador Zanier, in 1 minute. I just want to conclude the report by saying that also our office in Vienna, after I think 19 years of tenure of Ambassador Notelle, has now seen some structural changes. We've changed premises. I already mentioned this in July. Now we have a new head of office, Daria Reauthorization is here. She heads the office in Vienna, and Ambassador Notelle's function as a special representative and representing the Assembly in the political body of the OSCE, the Permanent Council, is carried out by Ambassador Franceschi, who is also connected here. This is as far as I have, but I'm sure there will be questions or comments, so I remain at your service for questions. And I yield the floor to Ambassador Zanier to give us some highlights on the Helsinki Plus 50 initiative. Thank you very much.
So please, Zanier, first of all, thank you, Secretary General, for your report. And by this, I will give the floor to Mr. Ambassador Lamberto Zanier. The floor is yours. Please.
Thank you, Madam President, Secretary General. Good afternoon to everybody. A year ago, we were negotiating the text of the call for action with the how can I say, the past leaders of this organization. And in fact, in the margins of the, virtual Tirana ministerial, this was formally launched. So it has been a year of reflection on how can parliamentarians support the, more visibility, more effectiveness, the strengthening more generally of the OSCE. This is what the call for action is about. We also, at some point, gave ourselves a perspective, which is the Helsinki Plus 50. There are lots of appeals for a summit for the 50th anniversary. Of course, parliamentarians can play a role in advocating that. But certainly, the Helsinki Plus 50 is not the only objective, the only perspective, because in fact, many of the issues that we've discussed can have a follow-up already at the short term. We've had at the beginning of the year, or since the beginning of the year, important discussions on decision-making modalities, the OSCE, in particular the consensus rule, on how to raise the profile of the organization, on how to revitalize the dialogue. More recently, we had meetings on women, peace and security, on strengthening a youth perspective and giving a stronger role to young parliamentarians in our work. And then most recently, we had a meeting on the human dimension. The participation has always been around 100 participants, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. I would like to encourage everybody to attend these meetings and to contribute to these meetings, because what we want to achieve is to make sure that the documents that we issue, the reports that we issue, in fact, reflect everybody's perspectives. We are well aware that there are differences of views and different perspectives, and we would like to have everybody engaged so that all these perspectives emerge in the reports and the recommendations that we issue. Looking ahead, and I will conclude just with a few points on this. Looking ahead now, we will have in the margins of the ministerial council in Stockholm a meeting with the president and a number of the vice presidents to discuss the strategy on how to proceed forward on this call for action path. So that will determine in a way also the further direction of the work. But from my perspective, the way I see it now, there are 2 or 3 directions in which we should move. One is the continuation of the thematic work. We want to discuss, and we will continue also discussing the decision making, etc. The resourcing the organization, strengthening in the profile, and also engaging with the civil society, these large themes. Secondly, we will be working on the dimensions and looking at how the committees are working, but try to, in that context, to bring in the perspective of the Helsinki Plus 50. So what should the summit focus on? What will the heads of state and government be interested in when it comes to the OSCE? So what are the real important issues that the organization should invest in? And the third point, we will start organizing also events with interested countries, so to follow up, to highlight particular issues in which they may be interested. So we will begin some travel now that hopefully COVID will allow more mobility, to work with parliaments in various places and to start discussing issues and raising the profile of the OSCE in various OSCE countries. So I would like also there to encourage you to let us know if you are interested, and we already have a number of potential candidates for events on the ground, and we are looking forward to working closely with you also in this way. So this concludes this brief report. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Tangier, for your report. And by this, can we accept the report from Secretary General and Ambassador Tangier? And I find so. And before I open the floor for questions and remarks, I would like to give the floor to Senator Benjamin Cardin, Special Representative on Anti-Semitism, Racism and Intolerance. And this is because he has to return to his session in a few minutes. And I hope you can agree to this. Yes, thank you. I will give the floor to Senator Benjamin Cardin.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate being taken somewhat out of order. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is convening in about 15 minutes to take up some important nominations. We are looking forward to getting our ambassador to the OSCE confirmed. So thank you for that. I just really wanted to give you a brief update as Special Representative on anti-Semitism, racism, and intolerance. Just a few months ago at the annual session, I came before this body to request the adoption of an urgent item to address the alarming rise of hate-related violence and intolerance we are witnessing throughout the OSCE region. And I want to thank my colleagues for their support of that urgent item. As I outlined in my current report, the situation has not improved. The coronavirus pandemic continues to disproportionately impact people of color, alongside heightened anti-Asian, anti-migrant, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and violence. And while George Floyd's death highlighted abuses within our law enforcement system and racial injustice around the world, it has not prevented more police shootings in my country. It also did not prevent the June death of Stanislav Tomas, a Romanian man who was tragically killed in the same manner as George Floyd, with a Czech police officer kneeling on his neck. Xenophobic views have increased with the influx of migrants and refugees from Afghanistan, Haiti, and other countries. Tensions in the Middle East continue to foster anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim bigotry throughout the OSCE region. While authoritarian regimes weaponize hate to justify past injustices and ongoing conflicts that sow division, weaken democratic norms, and threaten regional security. My report details my efforts to address these concerns, from legislative efforts on policing, covert racial disparities in Afghanistan, to calling for a global response on anti-Semitism. However, much more is needed to guarantee the democratic and security commitments of our countries have agreed to as part of the OSCE. That is why I'm working to have the urgent item we adopted in July on addressing the rise of hate, intolerance, violence, and discrimination across the OSCE region considered as part of this year's Ministerial Council's discussion. When the Parliamentary Assembly passes a resolution, either as an urgent or supplementary item, we should not simply share it with our diplomatic counterparts. We should press for its implementation in our governments. I hope fellow heads of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly delegations present here will help on doing just that. Again, I thank the Standing Committee for their support on this issue, and I look forward to our continued working together on this important mission.
Thank you very much, Senator Benjamin Cardin, for your report. And by this, I will open the floor for questions, remarks, comments on the reports from the President, from Treasurer and Secretary General. On the speakers list, I will give the first one is head of the Finnish delegation, Mr. Junila. He will be followed by the head of the Azerbaijan delegation, Mr. Kuryev. Mr. Junila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I would especially like to thank Secretary General Montella for a report that was prompt, but actually had more concrete information and was more thorough than we have received in recent memory. Thank you for having such a report and also the time-saving part of the report. I'm sure all of us really appreciated it. And Madam President, we are closer than you might imagine. As our Danish colleagues might notice from the surroundings, the Nordic Council is gathering at the Parliament here in Copenhagen. So while the Standing Committee is working remotely, we are not too far physically, and perhaps we should also return to normalcy like the Nordic Council has now decided. The Finnish delegation thanks for adopting the call for action for a debate, and we have followed with great interest the debate in the various webinars of the Helsinki Plus 50 process. And as you know, all 7 webinars have brought a valuable contribution to the discussion on the future of the organization. But of course, that's in the past, and what we are really looking for are comments from Ambassador Chanier regarding the future objectives of the process. There were 3 points highlighted by the ambassador in his report, and we would welcome even more thorough response if that's possible. We would really appreciate it. And the Finnish delegation is also interested to hear the views and plans of the Standing Committee regarding the Helsinki Plus 50 process. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Junila. I now will give the floor to Mr. Galiev, head of the delegation from Azerbaijan. He will be followed by the head of the delegation from Netherlands, Ms. Farah Karimi. Mr. Galiev, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Secretary General of the heads of the delegation, dear colleagues. Of course, it is my pleasure to have this opportunity to see all of you today. And I also want to thank our Secretariat, International Secretariat, for organizing and convening this Standing Committee meeting. Madam President, I'd like to make some comments on Roberto Mantella's report. We all know that how it is difficult for our International Secretariat to fulfill all its duties under such a difficult circumstances stemming from the pandemic. I really appreciate and thank Secretary General Roberto Mantella and his professional team for ensuring and keeping our Assembly full function in all its key mandated activities. I also agree with Roberto that improvements are needed in the implementation of the Assembly's rules of procedures based on the new reality. We all listened to Roberto's report with some concern that there is really things that needs to be discussed and resolved. And I hope that Secretariat in close cooperation with Subcommittee on Rules and Procedures and Working Practice headed by our friend Lord Bonis will come up with some proposals to our next Bureau meeting. In general, I fully support the call of Secretary General to prioritize activities. We really need to focus on where the PA can effectively add value. It is an undeniable fact that Roberto has transformed this assembly from a body that only had statutory meetings into a very vibrant and active assembly. We all see it from infographic that was provided by our secretariat, and we really can compare the differences before 2015 and after 2015 when Roberto as a Secretary General assumed the office. I do believe that we should trust Roberto's appropriate judgment as a Secretary General and contribute to the unity of our assembly and to make it further stronger. Maybe as a question I'd like to raise and ask Roberto Montella to share some of his thoughts with us, how he sees the next steps, how he sees the overcoming these obstacles, and how a bureau can really the help and can contribute to the resolution of the difficulties or the problems that currently our assembly is facing. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Pulyev. Before I give the floor to Secretary General to reply, I will give the floor to some more members of the Standing Committee. Next speaker is Ms. Karimi. She will be followed by Mr. Joel Jensen from Denmark, who is head of the Danish delegation as well as treasurer. Ms. Karimi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you also for your leadership and for really very meaningful activities that you have actually done in the last couple of months. I would like also to respond to the points actually brought to our attention by our Secretary General. I think I would also strongly support his call for actually the clarifying the rules of procedures, because the Vienna meeting, for me, that was the first time actually attending the Standing Committee and having those kind of discussions. It was quite frustrating also as participant. And I think we need really some work to do there. So, and if we can prioritize that, I would strongly support that. And the second point that he raised, I think, is also a very valid point. Again, as a newly appointed special representative on youth, I have witnessed in the last couple of months how actually strong the staff members are involved in the work and how high the workload is also for the staff member. And I think it is just not responsible what we are doing with this really huge amount of activities, and then with limited resources and with limited financial and human resources. It is absolutely important to prioritize the activity. In that sense, I would like actually to our Secretary General. I can imagine that really the main departure point for our activities should be the effectiveness of parliamentary diplomacy. So can actually the Secretariat help us and provide some really best practices, good practices in where this parliamentary diplomacy has been successful and we're not, because we are not going to do activities because of doing activities, but we are doing activities because we aim to reach something and we want to achieve something. And in that sense, would be helpful to really have his thoughts about how could we really develop mechanisms so that the focus on parliamentary diplomacy can be guaranteed and the activities are also selected by this criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Karimi. Next the speaker will be Mr. Peter Juel Jensen from Denmark, followed by Ms. Irina Charalambidis, head of the delegation from Cyprus. Peter Juel Jensen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for 3 very good reports, both from the President and the Secretary General, and of course the Treasurer. 3 very good reports. Yeah, nobody else have said it. The Treasurer also makes good work. Madam President, I would like to congratulate you in your new office. I think you have been very active, and I think it is very good to read the news from Copenhagen, where I can see what you are doing and where you are now. And I think you have taken on you some very good work, but also very important work. And I think you have started from the top and then you are moving your way down, and I will congratulate you. And I hope that you will use the Bureau in every way you can to make sure that your words will be heard all over the OSCE area. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for a very good report to the Secretary General. I agree with you, Roberto, that we also need to look forward and how to improve the organization. And whenever you are building a new house, you need a strong foundation. And that is why I can see in your report that you have said here that effective from 1st October, there is a new International Secretariat Office structure. We are, as I can see in your report, we are putting more efforts in the Vienna office. Now it's going to be some kind of a secretariat in line with the one we have in Copenhagen, and not only a liaison office. I would like to know who has approved that kind of a decision. Is it not a decision that we should talk about in the Bureau? Because our rules of procedures are saying that the secretariat is lying in Copenhagen and not in Vienna. So I think, and I agree with you, we need a strong foundation for our organization to build on with the fantastic work our president is doing. But we are spreading out our efforts now if we are having a secretariat both in Vienna and also in Copenhagen. Our staff will use too much time on the highway to go back and forth, and it will create confusions. I would like to know who has approved that kind of decision, and why are we going to have 2 secretariats in the future? Thank you.
Much, Mr. Juel Jensen. Of course, the report of the Treasurer was fantastic. And I look forward to hear your presentation for the proposed budget in the winter meeting. And now I would also like to say that I agree very much with your reflections that it's important to be responsible with the resources from the Secretariat, just as the Secretary General mentioned. And I will give the floor. And by the way, I support very much what you said, and I think it's important that we have and respect the rules of procedures and the rules, the way we take decisions in the Assembly. So I look forward to listen to what our Secretary General have to say on this issue, because it's of course very, very important, as you mentioned, that it shouldn't be more time for spend on travel than necessary, but also of course for the reasons of where is the office is need to be clear. I will give the floor to Ms. Irina Charalambidis, head of the delegation from Cyprus. She will be followed by Senator Chris Smith from USA. And by this, I will give the floor to Ms. Irina Charalambidis. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and I will agree with the previous speaker, Mr. Joel Jensen, that you are doing excellent work. You are representing us the best way possible, and you are quite active indeed. So many people have the chance to hear and learn about the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE. Now, when it comes to Secretary General report, I fully support what he said, especially the strategic approach. We have to carefully coordinate with the International Secretariat, whose advice might say and support is invaluable. I was involved in many activities with ODIHR, OSCE, and we had to work really hard with Marco Bonabello in Vienna and Anya. And indeed, well said, Roberto, the staff does that extra mile with utmost professionalism. And as far as the conference in Cyprus is concerned, which was supposed to take place in May 2020 and now is planned for May 2021, no worries, we will take full responsibility when it comes to organize things, and we have very experienced personnel at the Parliament in Cyprus, Eleni Georgiou and Marina Adamidou, who will organize the conference with great pleasure and professionalism. So no worries about organization of this conference. Thank you, Madam President. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charalambidis, for your kind word. But I would like to underline that the work of the OSCE PA, it's not about the president, it's about the work that all of us do, about all the work that's done by the delegation in all the member countries, because that's what's counted. That's what's give us a good, make a good work and also give us a good reputation as organization. So I say, keep up the good work and let's continue. By this, I will give the floor to Mr. Chris Smith from US. The floor is yours. Thank you. I can't hear Mr. Chris Smith, if I understood right. He have already disconnected to go to
Hello?
the Senate. Oh, he's back. Welcome. Welcome. The floor is yours, Mr. Chris Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm sorry, somehow I got disconnected, but Madam President Setterfeld, thank you again for your strong and abiding commitment to effectively combating modern-day slavery, sex, and labor trafficking. You have been a champion. Your leadership and compassion for victims inspires and motivates, and it does matter who's president. And I want to thank you for your leadership across the board. It is extraordinary. I am distributing, Madam President, a longer written report, but I would like to take this opportunity to highlight a few issues very briefly. I know there will be a discussion tomorrow on issues related to Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, I'm heading at 10 o'clock to a hearing, and we'll be talking about that very issue. As Special Representative on combating human trafficking, I am concerned about the vulnerability, I know you are as well, and members of our Assembly, to trafficking of Afghani children and women, especially those left behind in Afghanistan. I also have the same concern for those who fled, who now may have ended up in an unstable situation in another country, including the United States. We all need to carefully monitor the situation inside Afghanistan and also to monitor the welfare and the safety of the refugees. As I've reported previously, Madam President, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a serious impact on anti-trafficking efforts, on patterns of trafficking, on victims, and on survivors. Teleworking and social distancing practicing shifted to and increased various forms of human trafficking online. While many schools were closed during the pandemic, children spent more of their time online, where they were vulnerable to being groomed by sexual predators and lured into trafficking situations, including on gaming sites and social media platforms. Many nations have opened up again for tourist travel. That's great, raising concern, however, for concerns for sex tourism. And there is a concern, and I have it very strongly, I think you do as well, that the sex tourism may even explode in prevalence. The economic impact of the pandemic left many people without jobs, including trafficking survivors who may have ended up being re-trafficked due to the loss of employment. I again urge all of us to step up our anti-trafficking efforts in response to the pandemic by educating school children to protect them from online grooming and trafficking, and by thwarting sexual predators who engage in sex tourism and the use of international notifications about traveling sex offenders. We must make it a top priority to educate children, guardians, teachers, and others to keep our children safe. Pursuant to a law that I wrote named after Frederick Douglass, that great abolitionist who was a slave himself and then led the effort to abolish slavery, our departments of education and HHS, again pursuant to my law, have worked with NGOs to develop elementary and secondary age school curriculum to make students and teachers situationally aware on how to avoid becoming a victim. You might recall at the PA that I chaired a side event, also brought it up in various other venues at the Luxembourg. We had the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass join us, and he talked about the curriculum that they have developed. Kenneth Morris, again, the great-great-grandson of this amazing former slave who helped stop slavery in the United States and in the world, has a curriculum. It's an excellent curriculum, as do others. And I encourage people, if they'd like us to share all of that with you, we will. We also need to do more to protect our children against child sex tourism. International Megan's Law, a law I authored in 2016, provides travel notifications of convicted, I emphasize convicted, sex offenders traveling from the United States to foreign countries. Since its enactment in the United States, it has provided about 15,500 notifications, and over 6,000 registered sex offenders have been denied entry. They've been made inadmissible to your countries so that they don't prey upon your children. Together with Congresswoman Karen Bass, a Democrat from California, I'm a Republican from New Jersey, I recently introduced new bipartisan legislation in the United States to strengthen our programs in both these and other areas. The new bill, called the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act, will enhance U.S. efforts to prevent trafficking and to assist and protect victims. It strengthens programs to keep children safe by adding prevention of online grooming and trafficking of children through linguistically accessible, culturally responsive, trauma-informed approaches and programs that use proven best practices. It strengthens protection for victims and witnesses during investigations, and that's really important, and increases restitution for survivors. It increases investigations of labor trafficking as well and provides stricter sanctions for traffickers. The bill adds accountability through anti-trafficking training and codes of conduct for staff of hotels and airlines that contract with the U.S. government by increasing transparency in anti-trafficking expenditures. It also permanently incorporates the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking as part of the U.S. government's commitment to survivor-informed policy. And I know many of our countries in the OSCE space believe we need to keep talking to the survivors and learn from them, because they are the most informed and motivated among all of us. I'm happy to share more details with any of you. I would also ask and urge your governments to support a draft decision proposed by the U.S. For the Stockholm Ministerial on strengthening efforts to prevent and combat trafficking. The draft contains some of the same points I just mentioned. It would also strengthen the national referral mechanisms or similar structures to identify and assist victims, as well as training to ensure victim-centered and trauma-informed approaches. Again, Madam President, thank you for this opportunity. And I am leaving for a hearing, so I appreciate you putting me in the queue so I can get to my hearing, which starts in 1 minute. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Smith. And I will make one more adjustment on the speakers list. It's Ms. Taverna from Italy, Special Representative on Elderly Issues. She is the Deputy President over the Italian Senate, and she will go to share the next session in the Italian Parliament. And I will give the floor to Ms. Taverna, and after her will follow replace from Secretary General Roberto Montella. Ms. Taverna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear Ms. President, dear colleagues, I'm honored and pleased to be here today as a special representative on elderly issue. Now I speak Italian. In primo luogo vorrei ringraziare la Presidente Margareta Sederfeld per la sensibilità dimostrata rispetto alla rilevanza di questo tema. L'idea di questo incarico è venuta in seguito ad una comune riflessione con la rapporteur della Commissione Economica, Elona Oxa. Nella sua relazione della sessione annuale di luglio ha inserito le parole anziani come gruppo a cui l'Osce deve dare più attenzione e tutela. La popolazione dell'area Osce sta invecchiando in virtù di fenomeni che tutti conosciamo. Il primo è l'innalzamento della speranza di vita. Sappiamo che la pandemia da Covid-19 ha purtroppo ridotto l'aspettativa di vita, ma per fortuna il trend resta quello. Il secondo è la diminuzione delle nascite. Uno studio del Parlamento europeo riferisce che in Europa nel 2050 l'età media sarà di 49 anni e che un cittadino su 10 avrà più di 80 anni. Se ora c'è una persona anziana ogni 4 in età lavorativa, in un'età compresa tra i 15 e i 65 anni, nel 2060 questo rapporto sarà di 1 a 2. L'invecchiamento della popolazione solo apparentemente però rappresenta un problema, può invece diventare un'occasione di sviluppo. Se da un lato è vero che attualmente la spesa degli stati per le persone anziane è oggi circa il 20% del prodotto interno lordo, dall'altro le capacità di spesa delle persone anziane e il loro contributo alla crescita economica sono maggiori e la capacità delle persone anziane di dare un contributo alla società cresce con una velocità sorprendente. Quindi io credo che vanno attuate politiche di inclusione delle persone longeve. Queste persone vanno sempre più coinvolte nel tessuto economico e produttivo. È il tema della Silver Economy, che punta al pieno coinvolgimento delle persone longeve nella vita economica e sociale. La Silver Economy richiede nuove competenze. Basti pensare alle nuove forme di sanità digitale, health, e di medicina distante o di smart home, basati sul controllo digitale a distanza delle strutture e dei servizi. Desidero informarvi che a marzo di quest'anno, con l'aiuto di molti colleghi all'interno del Parlamento italiano, io ho costituito un intergruppo che si occupa della longevità. Questo intergruppo di parlamentari italiani e di esperti lavora in una prospettiva complessiva e multidisciplinare. Fanno parte dell'intergruppo numerosi stakeholder attivi in ambito sociale provenienti dal mondo della società civile. L'intergruppo ha svolto già molto lavoro ascoltando non solo esperti italiani ma anche di altri paesi. Sono stati dedicati diversi incontri alla dimensione internazionale del fenomeno dell'invecchiamento e alle strategie nazionali utilizzare per gestire al meglio i problemi della componente anziana della popolazione. Sono stati relatori dell'intergruppo il vice direttore generale aggiunto della FAO, il commissario europeo al lavoro e ai diritti sociali, l'ambasciatore giapponese in Italia, nonché il vicepresidente del Parlamento europeo, onorevole Castaldo. Ecco, io sono onorata di poter svolgere il mio incarico di rappresentante speciale per gli anziani per conto dell'Assemblea parlamentare Osce. Il mio obiettivo principale sarà quello di sensibilizzare i colleghi dell'Assemblea sulle strategie adottate da paesi dell'area Osce nell'affrontare i temi legati alla longevità. In particolare intendo lavorare sulle buone pratiche di inclusione delle persone longeve nella società civile. È mia intenzione presentare esempi di Silver Economy e alcuni modelli adottati da diversi paesi per il coinvolgimento delle persone anziane nella vita economica e civile. Ho già iniziato un lavoro di conoscenza e di studio e mi prefiggo di svolgere un ulteriore approfondimento, se necessario anche con missioni da effettuare sul campo, per poter verificare direttamente la realtà nei singoli paesi. Io la ringrazio nuovamente, Presidente Sederfeld, per la sensibilità che ha dimostrato, per l'attenzione, anche concedendomi di intervenire per poter assolvere poi ai miei obblighi qui nel Senato, e grazie a tutti voi per l'ascolto. Grazie ancora.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taverna. And now I will give the floor to Secretary General, Mr. Roberto Montella. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much for all of those who have taken the floor. I'll respond in the order of the questions. Vice President Zayguliev, thank you very much for your support, your personal support. You asked where we can add value. Trust me, this is my headache on a daily basis. I'm trying to find ways for this assembly to add value, to provide to the members of this assembly, not only the elected leadership, but also the other 300 members, the possibility to come in our midst and have something that they can be proud of, something that they feel that they can contribute to. I think all of you who are members of this assembly work in your national parliaments. When you come to our assembly, you come to our assembly with a desire, of course, to know a new country. If you visit a new country, you come to us with a desire to do something that has some relevance and that can also be brought back home as a sign of visibility of your work abroad. My headache on a daily basis is indeed to try find ways to provide to the members an assembly with its tools, with its assets that allows you to add value. Now, some thoughts on the next steps and how to overcome these challenges that we have, Mr. Zayguliev. I suggest common sense there. It's very simple. I think we have president, vice presidents who now have some of you have a special representative role. We have head of commissions, committees, migration and fighting against terrorism. We have the three committees. I think it's very simple. I think each person who has a portfolio, a responsibility, should interact with the International Secretariat. Should say, these are our priorities from now until July. We would like to do these 2-3 activities, or we would like to do these 2-3 things. And the Secretariat will say, look, this is what is happening already in the OSCE. There are these mandated conference, these are this set of activities, these are the trip visit already planned by other entities which we can join on. So we give you a full-fledged picture of what's going to happen. We hear out your priorities and your ideas. And in this dialogue between the International Secretariat and the holder of a portfolio, we devise a set of initiatives, a set of activities, which can be a conference, which can be a visit, which can be an op-ed, which can be a press release. I mean, there are different ways in which this assembly speaks. But I think the activity as such should be the result of a dialogue between the mandator, the one who has a portfolio, and the International Secretariat, because we provide the perspective. And we also are able to tell you, well, this is something we have the resources for, this is something we have the capability for, and this is something that we have the human resources also to accompany if it's a trip. I think it's very much common sense. What we should avoid is to try to approach the next 7 months saying, oh, well, I have today an empty slot in my schedule, let's arrange a visit to that country. I mean, like this, it doesn't work. Because if you have an empty slot in your calendar, it doesn't mean that we can manage to organize a field visit in countries, sometimes very delicate countries with a history and a past which require a lot of attention. So we would like to do our activities in a more systemic way, in a more organized way, and with the idea exactly of giving you the possibility to add value. So this is the way forward, Mr. Zayguliev, is a dialogue with the International Secretariat, with my colleagues, not only with me, because you have many colleagues here, and you will see in this report on the staff that was referred to, I have put the focal point for each of the activities. So please interact with these focal points, talk to the focal points, talk also to me, of course, and let's try to find an agreement on what can be the activities. Does this mean that we should not be able to react to the emergencies? No, we should. And I have been the promoter of an assembly which is ready to jump in and react if there is an emergency. We did a visit to Turkey over the summer once because there was a failed coup d'etat in Turkey. So I am all for activities which are also extra, let's say, curricula, but they have to be well thought through and not be the result of a desire to travel to some place or a desire to compete with predecessors who have traveled a lot. I mean, this is not the way we should conduct activities. Farah Karimi, thank you very much for your nice words of support to the staff and the words of respect to the staff. Indeed, I'm very proud of this staff. I tell you, I have invested a lot of my time in these first years of my mandate as Secretary General exactly to establish a team which would be very special because this team, and you mentioned, Farah, can you give us some best practices of other assemblies? I can give you best practices of other assemblies. Other assemblies like the NATO Parliamentary Assembly or the Council of Europe or the European Parliament, although it's a different type of assembly, they have their set activities. There are no extracurricular activities as we organize here. This is my invention in 2016. I decided that this assembly should be more active and should be able to react to the priorities that come up. Before my time, there was no committee on migration. There was no committee on the fight against terrorism. There was no discussion on climate change unless they were within the framework of the second committee. So all these activities and all these special representatives, as I said, I am guilty as charged. I've opened this Pandora's box. I wanted to have many activities because I strongly believe that members of parliament can really add value in international politics. But they have to do it within a structure, and the Parliamentary Assembly has the flexibility to do that. So if we look at our rules of procedure, you asked, how can we adapt our rules of procedure? In our rules of procedures, they only talk about 5 statutory meetings. We have no discussion about visits, field activities. There is not even the Vienna office was mentioned. I will get to the Vienna office in our rules of procedure. There is none of that. All of this has been a kind of suggestions that I've made to several presidents that were in the leadership while I became Secretary General. And I said, and I convinced those presidents to say, look, we have a patrimony of 300 members who are willing, who are ready to be deployed on the ground to do some activity. We have to create for them the possibility to do something that is meaningful, that is something that they feel they are impacting and being involved into something greater than only their national politics. So thank you for the word of the staff, because the staff of this assembly is indeed very different from the staff of the Council of Europe and the NATO PA, where they have civil servants, international contracts, which are, let's say, very regulated by the ILO. And you will hear from staff of other assemblies, they will tell you, well, this is not within my job description. I don't have to jump on a plane and come and assist a special representative on a field visit and arrange meetings on the spot and other requests. This is what you will get from other parliamentary assemblies. You don't get it in this parliamentary assembly because the way I've hired the staff here, I've said, and Gustavo often reminds me, I've said in the DNA of the members of the OSCE Secretariat, there is a desire to do the extra mile. So this extra mile is there, but doesn't have to be abused. So it has to be understood that the approach that our staff has is coming from the way I have hired and coached our staff, but they are at the service of a bigger plan. And a bigger plan is not the erratic, sometimes, requests of arranging visits all of a sudden, but it has to come through a serious, structured dialogue between the International Secretariat and those who hold the mandate. Peter Juliensen, thank you very much for your remarks. I think your report was very good, not only your report today, but also your report in July, where you actually stood up and defended our budget against the backdrop of some countries who were a bit critical on our budget. Thank you very much for your leadership on that. And without you, of course, none of us will be here, because without the money, we cannot conduct any of our activities. I just want to reassure you that there is no 2 secretariats and that there are no 2 headquarters. It's in the rules of procedure, it's very clear. The headquarters of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is in Copenhagen, and it will remain in Copenhagen, full stop. There is no other headquarters of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly other than the one in Copenhagen. And the structure that you see now in Vienna exactly reflects that. As you can see now, the office in Vienna is simply a branch office which hosts an array of activities of the Parliamentary Assembly. But the headquarters and the head of this office is in Vienna, is in Copenhagen. So there is a number of activities in Vienna that are conducted by our, let's say, branch office there, but there is not an extra headquarters in Vienna. By the way, also that in the rules of procedures that we will have to reform, we will also have to put some word explaining exactly why there is an office there. The decision to establish an office there dates back to 2003, I think. So that's where the office was established. It was not my decision. It didn't require further decision to hire new people or to restructure the office. This is within the prerogative of my mandate as Secretary General to decide how I want to reshape the format of the office there, including the choice of the senior members of the office in Vienna. This is within the perimeter of my responsibility as Secretary General. There are two decisions that normally need an approval by the Standing Committee on staffing, and these are the decision of the Deputy Secretary General. So when I appoint a Deputy Secretary General, I make the decision, but that decision needs to be approved by 2/3 majority in a secret ballot by the Standing Committee. But of course, this is the only place where in the rule of procedures, it talks about decisions of the Secretary General that need to be approved by the Standing Committee. For the rest, I had the autonomy and the responsibility to make those decisions. Irene Karalambidis, thank you very much for your words of support, of course, and for the great initiative on the Cyprus Conference on Corruption. And I know you said to us not to have any worries, but this is one activity where we will indeed support you and together work with you and the Cyprus Parliament in doing this. We were planning to do this already 2 years ago. So this is an activity which has been discussed with the International Secretariat, which receives the full support of the International Secretariat. So this is not something that you have to freelance and offer not to require our support. We will support the Conference on Corruption. And of course, we hope to come in big numbers to support the fight against corruption there. In conclusion, Madam President, dear members, I think one thing that emerges really from this debate is that you've seen this assembly, and from the graphic you will see, totally changing in the last 6 years. I ask you for your trust. I ask you to believe that I'm trying to really create here the conditions for you to be able to have an impact in international politics. This is all I have dedicated my hours to. So trust me that I will try to bring you into an assembly which will have the tools to do all the things that you normally would like to do and that you cannot do in other assemblies because they are very rigid and because their rules of procedures do not allow here. Here in our rules of procedure, we have expanded our activities. Now the rules of procedures have somehow to follow us, have to also englobe all the activities that exists. And I hope that we will embark onto this project in the next months in order to also have a legal, let's say, document or a legal framework that kind of supports all the extracurricular activity that we are conducting. Thank you very much to all of you, and I remain at your service also bilaterally to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Mr. Peter Juul Jensen have requested the floor again, and I will give you the floor. Please, Mr. Juul Jensen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your answers, Secretary General. I think we have to, and I think that reflects very good the debate on this issue on the agenda. I think in the future we have to use the time it takes to make sure that our rules of procedures, the frame that we are all working within, is working, and we all know what is set in the rules of procedure. I can understand that there are some things that is not mentioned in the rules of procedure, but I also think, you know, the two main reports of today, and it was not mine, the presidents and the secretary generals, it would be very nice for all of us to know, have you read the other report? Because the president is talking a little bit in the past and the secretary general is talking in the future. But it should be the political elected who should talk about the future. And the Secretary General who should look back and not forward. I would like that the Bureau or in the Standing Committee that would take some time to make sure that the triangle between the President, the Secretary General, and the Bureau or Standing Committee, to make sure that there are some good ways that we can work together, but also that we can recognize each other's ideas so we can stand on the same platform in the future. I think we should take the necessary time, because we can have a lot of ideas, we can use a lot of money, but if we don't have the same mission, if we don't have the same goal, we will fail all the time and we will not be a strong organization. I think we have to use some focus internally in the organization. And I hope that somebody between the President and the Secretary General can suggest a way to get there, because I think it is very crucial and it's very necessary for this organization. Thank you.
Mr. Juul Jensen, I think you really highlighted a very important issue here. It's how will we proceed for the future, how to secure that the organization is working in the best way forward, and how also to take care about the political influence, the political will, and of course, there is also the Secretariat and the resources, and these two, political and the Secretariat, need to work together for the future. And I totally agree with you of the importance to bring this question in on the table for the Bureau, and then also, of course, take it back to the Standing Committee. And my promise is to bring this question that you raised, how to move forward, for the table for the Bureau meeting we will have in December, when it's the Ministerial Council, because I see this as really important. Let me just mention how to prioritize, which kind of project, how to go forward. It's absolute a political issue as well, which question should be prioritized. And to do this prioritization, there need to be an open and transparent procedure. It can't be something that one person or two persons sit and have some thoughts about. It need in an assembly with 57 member countries to be very clear procedure. And I think we have to take this question very serious for the future. And when talking about, our Secretary General talked about resources, I would like to mention one thing. When President Tsereteli has initiated the two ad hoc committees, the one on the terrorism and the other one on migration.
It wasn't Tsereteli, to be sure, it was not Tsereteli who initiated them.
It wasn't Tsereteli? Okay. That was the story.
Alain Neri, who suggested in 2016 the establishment of the ad hoc committee on migration, and the Standing Committee in Vienna 2016 accepted it. And it was Nikolai Kovalov from the Russian Federation who suggested the establishment of a committee on the fight against terrorism. However, as the suggestion came from the Russian Federation, this would have probably created some concerns in some delegations, so we made it a suggestion from President Mutola.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I think there is also another issue that's important about the history of our organization and documentation of the history, because memory is short, particularly among us as our politicians. We are elected and we are not re-elected, and the circle goes around. Secretary General, continue.
Not always. Also, the Secretary General needs to be re-elected. The Secretary General is accountable.
Yes, but accountable, so are politicians. But let's go back to this serious issue. And it's, for example, when I was chairing the ad hoc working group on migration, I had the support of the Secretariat. But when I was appointed the special representative on the assassination of Boris Nemtsov, I didn't have support of the Secretariat. I had the support of my national parliament. And this is, of course, also an issue that needs to be discussed on both the political level and on the administrative level of the Secretariat, how to prioritize these resources. So let's bring it on the table and let's continue the work on this, or start the work on this. May I ask if you can agree on this, or is it wrong if I do raise this question? What the Secretary General say?
Fine.
It's fine. It's not against any rules. I ask this because it's important to know if it's okay for the rules. Okay, it will be on the table for the Bureau. It will be on the table for the Standing Committee further on, and there will be development on this issue. Thank you. And now there is the question raised as well by Lord Bones, President Emeritus, as well as chair of the working group on rule of procedures. So let's hear if I have said something wrong now, or if it's correct what we just have decided. Lord Bones, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Madam President. It had not been my intention to say anything until I heard so much talk about rules. And first of all, can I just thank you for appointing me as chairman of the Rules and Working Practices Subcommittee. I just want to reassure perhaps everybody who's contributed to this that the work that's gone into the rules and working practices in the past has been very much to ensure a number of things. First, that we make the best use of the time of our meetings. And secondly, that there is political steerage from the Bureau. And as far as I'm concerned, as chair of this subcommittee, they remain important aspects of our work. I think everybody needs to know, however, that under the leadership of Ambassador Notele, work has been going on to produce a revised set of rules to match some of the aspirations which we've expressed about working practices, and also meet some of the challenges from the rules as they actually stand. The obvious and outstanding one is the problem of the quorum and the rule relating to the quorum in plenary sessions. I'm sorry, I haven't got an answer to tell you, reveal to you this afternoon. That's an outstanding problem. As with regard to working practices, there are things to consider, like whether the general committees can meet in the autumn sessions. That would need a change of procedure. What I think is quite clear, however, that we cannot just glibly talk about the rules of procedure being changed. We've had more than 12 months of not having had the ability of being able to meet together and speak. If you look at the number of the rules of procedure and the length of them, to try and settle new wording over a Zoom meeting is virtually impossible, and there have to be some face-to-face meetings. These I propose to do towards the end of this year, and it'll be the first time we have really had the opportunity to sit down and do that. Then they need to go to you, Madam President, and your political leadership. And we need to ensure that we have support there, and we need to ensure that we have support within this committee. Members will know that the rules and their adoption and any changes to them, the power to do that rests with the Standing Committee. I have no intention of bringing a portfolio of new rules to the Standing Committee without having done absolutely everything to try and ascertain that they are going to get support, because they can be torpedoed by the raising of a hand at this meeting. So I don't want to raise ambitions. It would be nice to say that we would have everything in place for the annual meeting in Birmingham. That means that they would have to be passed by the Standing Committee in Vienna. I personally do not think that is realistic. And I say that now. If others disagree with me, well, I am sorry, but I do not think that we can go through the work that is necessary and do it properly and get that agreement. Other than that, yes, our objective is to make the rules flexible in their own way, but to ensure that we make the best possible use of the time that we have at meetings, that reports that perhaps don't need to go to bureaus and standing committees can go to committees or to the plenary, where they can have proper discussion and not just be forced through because it's time for the interpreters to go home. We've got to be effective, and to achieve that will take some time as far as the rules are concerned. Thank you. I'm sorry, I did not intend to interfere in this afternoon's meeting. But nevertheless, I thank you for allowing me to make these few remarks.
Lord Bonas, your remarks are always mostly welcome. There is no other else on the speakers list. I do therefore request if we could end this point. Yes, thank you. And then let's move to point number 5, review of the OSCE activities and current international political issues. As informed earlier, we have asked members wishing to speak under item 5 to sign up in advance to allow the Secretariat to group interventions into broad themes. Time permitting, should you wish to speak under this item, please indicate it in the chat. Please note that several written reports have been made available in advance in order to save time. I would invite members to take the floor only if they have something particularly relevant to highlight. I would kindly ask members to limit their interventions to 3 minutes to allow every registered speaker to take the floor. Before we go through our list of speakers, let me just inform you that I have approved the list of nominees for our election observation mission to Kyrgyzstan, which will be distributed shortly. I thank Peter Jules Jensen and Farah Karimi for leading our delegation in Bishkek. And now I will give the floor to Ms. Shamkaradase, head of the Georgian delegation. She will be followed by the Vice President Lopatka from Austria. And once again, I just would like to say I apologize in advance if I pronounce your names wrong. The floor is Mr. Shamkaradze. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President and distinguished colleagues. I would like to greet all of you and express appreciation for the work that OSCE does. Georgia closely collaborates with the OSCE in all 3 dimensions and is actively engaged with the OSCE independent institutions. We enjoy effective partnership through the parliamentary dimension and consider OSCE as an important platform for fostering the political will to implement OSCE principles. I would like to express also my sincere appreciation for OSCE's valuable engagement in the peaceful conflict resolution process in Georgia. And here I should also stress the important role of OSCE co-chairmanship in the Geneva international discussions. It is of utmost importance to maintain the essentiality of Russia-Georgia conflict resolution high on international and particularly on the OSCE agenda. We are extremely concerned with Russia's growing military presence and projecting power in the South Caucasus and Black Sea region. Russia tries to transform Black Sea into internal waterways where it can have the kind of freedom of action. In parallel, Moscow has intensified the annexation process of Georgia's occupied territories and continues provocations on a daily basis, seriously destabilizing the situation on the ground. putting up barbed wire fences in local residents' orchards, closure of the crossings at the occupation line, kidnappings and illegal detentions of citizens of Georgia, deprivation of right of ethnic Georgian children to get primary education in their native language, renaming of Georgian villages, and erasing Georgian cultural trace are just few examples of what occupation of historic Georgian provinces has caused. Here, I would like to ask all of you to strengthen your efforts to foster the occupation process of Georgia's occupied territories. Unfortunately, Russia, contrary to its commitments of ceasefire agreement of 2008, is undermining territorial integrity, peace, and stability of Georgia. Here, I would like to mention the unprecedented international legal victory of Georgia against Russia in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, that has delivered historical judgment confirming Russia's occupation and effective control over occupied regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, Russia's responsibility for killing, torture, ill treatment of our citizens, looting and burning of their houses, for deprivation of rights of internally displaced persons and refugees to return to their homes. It is of utmost importance that the international community gives due consideration to this judgment and effectively uses this legal instrument to make Russia to stop its illegal occupation and violation of human rights. I would like to also touch on a very important peaceful Caucasus Initiative proposed by Georgia. Georgia assumed its vital role of mediator between our two neighbors and intends to facilitate creation of a stable and safe environment in the region. Therefore, we propose to our Armenian and Azerbaijani brothers and sisters to activate parliamentary cooperation platform between our three countries and meet in Tbilisi to discuss the areas of post-conflict rehabilitation and confidence building in order to promote stability, peace, and prosperity in South Caucasus. I really very much hope that when we meet in the future meetings, we can already share the results of some very good cooperation between the three South Caucasus states. So thank you very much.
Sam Karadze. Next speaker is Vice President and Chair of the Ad hoc Working Committee on Counter-Terrorism, Mr. Lopatka from Austria. He will be followed by Vice President and Special Representative on Fighting Corruption, UNHCR Lambidis from Cyprus. Vice President Lopatka, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. Mr. Secretary General, distinguished colleagues. I'm honored to address you on behalf of our Ad hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism and Violent Extremism. Before I begin, I'm glad to announce that we have 3 new members. Please allow me to warmly welcome Ms. Vilija Aleknaite Abraham-Kiene from Lithuania, Ida Glanzmann Hunkela from Switzerland, and Mr. Predrag Rajic from Serbia. I'm sure that the CCT will benefit greatly from your engagement and your experience, which we need, of course. Dear colleagues, as mentioned in my previous report on the 2021 annual session, CCT's work is tailored from 5 major priorities: foreign terrorist fighters, border security and information sharing, radicalization prevention, supporting victims of terrorism, and exploring interlinkages of terrorism with other modern threats. In this line, with these priorities, in May this year, we held a parliamentary hearing to explore the experience of Kazakhstan in repatriating, prosecuting, rehabilitating, and reintegrating foreign terrorist fighters. Together with OSCE, we did this work, which was very important for us. And then we started also with regional policy dialogues, especially with a regional policy dialogue for Southeastern Europe, which was a big success. Here we had 50 parliamentarians and representatives from relevant legislative committees, and we want to continue with this work. I don't want to give you details. I have also a written report. What I want to say is that we work together with other parliamentary assemblies and also with the United Nations. United Nations are very important in this field and in our work. I am here close with United Nations Office on Counterterrorism, and in December I plan to participate here in a meeting which is organized by UNOCT, the role of parliamentarians in the implementation of national action plans for addressing terrorism and violent extremism. So our work is ongoing. I have a strong support by the Secretariat, and I am happy that new colleagues are supporting us, and we continue with national parliaments, but also with other interparliamentary assemblies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Lopatka, for your report, and wish you all the best with your future work. Next speaker will be Vice President Charalambidis. He will be followed by Vice President and Special Representative on Southeast Europe, Mr. Asai Guliev from Azerbaijan. Vice President Charalambidis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Since our last meeting in July, I have tried to further reinforce our synergies, our cooperation with the OSCE executive structures. I had a first online meeting with Special Representative of the Chairperson in Office, Mrs. Anita Ramasastri, in September. We discussed the priorities of the current Swedish OSCE presidency on the issue of the fighting against corruption and the importance of building further political will to combat this phenomenon. Mrs. Ramasastri expressed her readiness to cooperate on issues of mutual concern also, and I think this is quite important, by taking joint action. On 14th and 15th October, I participated in the ODIHR's 30th anniversary event. At the margins of the conference, I had the opportunity to meet with ODIHR officials, namely Mrs. Yulia Nedesova, Chief at the Democratic Governance and Gender Unit, and Mr. Konstantin, I have to get this right, Varchelasvili, Chief of the Legislative Support Unit, as well as Mrs. Andrea Huber, Head of the Human Rights Department. In these meetings, we discussed ways through which ODIHR's work can inform the work of the PA in the domain of preventing and combating corruption. On 18th and 19th October, I represented the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly as a guest of the Swedish chairmanship at the OSCE Economic and Environmental Dimension Implementation meeting in Vienna. And in my intervention, I underlined that in order to ensure the effectiveness of anti-corruption efforts, it is critical that competent state institutions, such as anti-corruption authorities, need to be provided, supreme audit institutions, public prosecutors need to be provided with all the necessary tools and budget resources that guarantee their independence and enable them to carry out their duties to the fullest. In the margins of that meeting, I met again with Special Representative Ramasastri, as well as with the Ambassador Ingli Hassani, coordinator of OSCE economic and environmental activities. And I also met with Mrs. Buchler, our second committee rapporteur, with whom we discussed possible avenues for cooperation. Furthermore, as announced in previous meetings, I have been working on preparing a code of conduct for us, the members of this assembly, so that we can lead by example in setting the bar high regarding combating corruption and promoting transparency. Last but not least, as I said before, I wanted to let you know once more that the conference on combating corruption we were planning in Cyprus in May 2020 and was deferred due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic is now being rescheduled for May 2022. You will receive invitations soon, and I hope that you will be able to attend. So see you all in Stockholm. Thank you, Madam President.
Vice President Charalambidis, and thank you for your report on your important work. Next speaker is Vice President Guliev. He will be followed of Ms. Farah Karimi, head of the delegation from Netherlands, and special representative on youth engagement. Vice President Guliev, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I will address the Standing Committee at the capacity of the head of the Azerbaijan delegation to the OSCE. Azerbaijan delegation would like to briefly update the Standing Committee on the current state of affairs related to post-conflict developments in our region. As you know, with the end of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan last year, our region entered into a new phase of post-conflict reconstruction and reintegration with some tangible achievements, but also serious challenges. Last July, Azerbaijan has set up Karabakh and East Zangezur economic regions in order to rebuild and reintegrate under the unified program of all the liberated cities, towns, and villages, which were pledged and razed to the ground by Armenia during the 30 years of occupation, as well as other conflict-affected territories. Over the last 10 months, Azerbaijan has made remarkable progress towards implementing the important infrastructure projects, such as construction of a new international airport in liberated Fizuli city that will function as Karabakh's air gate to the world. Two other international airports are under the construction in East Zangezur region. Along with airports, we are building highways covering up to 800 kilometers and 5 tunnels in the length of the 62 kilometers in order to boost the economy and tourism of both regions. It is also remarkable that a few days ago, the foundation of the Zangezur corridor was laid, which will be connecting Azerbaijan properly with its exclave, the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, via Armenia. Dear colleagues, as I briefed in our previous sessions, the minefields remain the biggest problem for rebuilding and eventually ensuring the return back of the former IDPs to their place of origin. Due to refusal of Armenia to provide the maps of hundreds of thousands of mines planted during the occupation in these territories, which caused the casualties, more than 160 innocent people, including civilians and journalists, made the demining process more dangerous and complicated. Another serious issue is still existence of the illegal Armenian armed detachments in the area where Russian peacekeepers are temporarily deployed. It is a major source of instability and the main obstacle for the reintegration of the citizens of Azerbaijan with Armenian origin into its political, social, and economic space. Armenia has an obligation under the paragraph 4 of the trilateral statement to withdraw all its remaining illegal armed forces from the mentioned area. Dear colleagues, in the post-conflict stage, one of the priorities of my country is to achieve the delimitation and demarcation of the state border between Armenia and Azerbaijan in line with the norms of and the principles of international law. Azerbaijan is also ready for reconciliation and normalization of interstate relations with Armenia on the basis of mutual recognition of and respect for each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of international recognized borders, including through signing a peace treaty based on these principles. In conclusion, I would like to touch upon an issue related to some of our colleagues' attempts to impose obsolete narratives and concepts concerning the former conflict, which are neither productive nor relevant to the reality on the ground. We expect those parliamentarians of the OSCE to refrain from making statements or references such as Nagorno-Karabakh or so-called status in any context while talking about the post-conflict situation. I want to re-emphasize that there is no administrative unit called Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan. But as I already mentioned earlier, there are Karabakh and East Zangezur economic regions established based on our constitution and international practice as part of sovereign right of Azerbaijan. The legitimate right of Azerbaijan must be respected by all. We also have to understand that such attempts are sending a wrong signal for Armenia, and in particular, it is revanchist circles which could easily lead to miscalculations or false expectations, eventually jeopardizing a fragile peace in the region established with the signing of trilateral statement. Instead, Armenia should reciprocate the constructive offer of Azerbaijan and seize the historic opportunity to normalize its relations with neighboring countries, which will open up immense opportunities for this country and for the broader region. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President Guliev. Next speaker is Ms. Farah Karimi from head of the Netherlands delegation. She will be followed by Mr. Hariani from Cyprus, Special Representative on Civil Society Engagement. Ms. Karimi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity. I guess I am not telling you anything new by saying that we are living in a particular challenging time. We are where we are confronted with multiple crises, climate change, huge social and economic inequalities within and between countries, shifting geopolitical and global power relations, new and old conflicts, extremism, violent movements, and authoritarianism threaten lives and livelihoods and democratic and human rights. Not only of millions of people, and especially youth currently living around the world, but also the lives of future generations. So from what I have seen in my almost 2 months of activities, talks, and visits as a special representative on youth engagement, I think there is really an enormous urgency to put the youth engagement in all 3 dimensions of OSCE work much higher on the agenda. To start with, it is quite difficult to find data and statistics on the state of affairs of youth in OSCE countries. There is, of course, data from the UN and the World Bank, but there is no specified data made available by OSCE itself. However, on the basis of the information that's available right now, we see that about 1.8 billion people around the world are younger than 30, which is more than ever before. In the OSCE region as a whole, about 30% of the population is younger than 24. Of course, there are big differences. In all Central Asia countries, for instance, the share of youth younger than 24 is higher than 40%, with Tajikistan as the highest outlier with almost 55%. On the other hand, in countries like Italy, Greece, and Portugal, less than 25% of the population is younger than 24. So in all of these societies, we face challenges, but in particular in countries with a very high share of youth, there are multiple challenges to address. 10 days ago, I participated with many of you in the International Presidential Election Observation Mission in Uzbekistan. There were more than 800,000 first voters. Out of 19 million people who voted in this election, about 9 million people were younger than 30. This is an enormous political potential for good, but also for less good intentions. Every year, 600,000 young people enter the labor market in Uzbekistan. For any economy, this would be a huge challenge. The scarcity of suitable land for agriculture and water shortage creates immense challenges in rural areas. I had meetings with very talented and motivated young people who want to work for the progress of their country, but are faced with multiple obstacles to be able to engage with the system. The country also needs to deal directly with the security issues as a result of events in Afghanistan. And this is only one example. What I am trying to say is that we need to be much more firm in our efforts and ambitions to include the youth perspective in everything we do. Therefore, we need high-level political attention and strategy on youth inclusion, to start with good data, reliable data analysis, and concrete and targeted policies. We need better coordination between the International Secretariat of OSCE, ODIHR, and country presences. There should be a better monitoring, learning, and evaluation system. I saw 3 weeks ago a very good example of youth work by the country presence in Albania. They integrated their annual youth trail to the Southeast Europe Media Conference, Journalism in Times of Crisis, organized in cooperation with the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media. Bringing the youth journalists and their perspectives as a very substantial part of the conference gave a fresh and future-oriented direction to the gathering and the outcomes of conference. We need better accountability mechanisms, at least a transparent and impactful reporting of the work of OSCE on youth to the Parliamentary Assembly. And last but not least, in the PA itself, we will be working on forming a network of young parliamentarians across the OSCE region. So please, colleagues, join the efforts and put the youth on the top of everything we do. Thank you very much.
Karimi, for your report. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus. He will be followed by Mr. Mikita Porchayev, head of the Ukraine delegation. Mr. Hadiani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. I was pleased to be appointed as special representative on civil society engagement by you and have been active in examining issues in this field. It is, of course, a big topic. I suspect that consultation with civil society experts is a standard part of work for most of us. Civil society can include international NGOs, neighborhood associations, business interests, and many more. They provide important expertise on climate change and on human rights monitoring, but also on global sustainable goals. Of course, I have no intention to engaging in the substance of all these topics. However, I do hope to be able to facilitate their work and to ensure that our Assembly can benefit from input by civil society representatives that want to speak with us. The OSCE governmental side continues to experience significant difficulties related to civil society participation, particularly in human dimension events, as you mentioned in your report. They have an informal process looking at this. I stand ready to support this process if considered useful. I was pleased to participate in the celebration of ODIHR's 30th anniversary last month and took the opportunity to meet with ODIHR experts as well as many NGOs representatives. I think it is so important that we understand both their expectations and the challenges that they face in interacting with the OSCE. While in Warsaw, I was also honored to address a civil society organized side event focused on human dimension issues. This conference reaffirmed my belief that we have much to benefit from close interaction with civil society. Through the many meetings I have had with civil society actors from many countries in the OSCE region, I would like to inform the Standing Committee about the deteriorating situation regarding the persecution of human rights defenders In many countries, the situation has gotten out of hand. I have noted very strongly the phenomenon of imprisoning people as political prisoners without trials to be the rule and not the exception. I identified the need for the OSCE participating states to adopt and implement the ODIHR guidelines on the protection of the human rights defenders, which are based on OSCE commitments and also universally recognized human rights standards that OSCE participating states have undertaken to adhere to. I will try to meet and talk with a large number of NGOs, listen to as many NGOs and activists as possible. For this reason, I will respond to the invitations I receive from meetings with them, either in person or via teleconferences. At the same time, through participation in seminars and conferences, such as the one I attended a week ago when I attended the conference which organized from ICAS Europe on the impact of populism on European institutions and on civil societies. I will also try, in addition to the ODIHR program, which applies to 5 countries, to talk to national parliaments about strengthening their role in developing the engagement, also the involvement of civil society in their work. The objective of the visits will be the examination of the situation of civil societies in those countries and to be informed about gaps and challenges, but also as well as identification of good practices. I hope that as special representative, I will continue to facilitate opportunities for this interaction. Thank you very much.
On the speakers list is Mr. Mikita Potorayev from Ukraine. He will be followed by Mr. Selami Altinok, head of the Turkey delegation. Mr. Potayev, head of the Ukraine delegation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, distinguished colleagues, the Assembly's annual session, which took place remotely in July 2021, reaffirmed that the OSCE PA continues to be entirely operational platform, ensuring necessary reaction to the current security threats in the OSCE region, despite difficulties posed by the pandemic. Let me thank you all again for the adoption of the Assembly's urgent resolution on destabilizing efforts of the Russian Federation in the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories of Crimea and Donbas, so as near our borders. We view this document as an important contribution of the Assembly to the international efforts aimed at overcoming the worst crisis in European security since the World War II, as well as insisting on the implementation of all previous OSCE resolutions adopted in 2014-2019 on Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine and violation of fundamental OSCE principles. We take this opportunity to draw the Assembly's attention to the Crimea Platform Summit, which was held in Kyiv in August of this year, and united 47 delegations representing national states and international organizations. It concluded with a declaration reiterating the international community's unwavering commitment to work together to deoccupy and return Crimea to Ukraine. We invite the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to join the Crimea Platform and contribute to the implementations of its goals. Ukrainian Parliament looks forward to working with OSCE PA and other interparliamentary fora within the Crimea Platform Interparliamentary Coordination Council. We also welcome the decision by the OSCE PA and the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights not to send observers for the parliamentary elections in Russia, which took place on September this year, due to limitations imposed by the Russian authorities on the election observation. We strongly condemn the organization by Russia and its occupation administration of illegal elections in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. We stress that the conduct of such elections is unlawful, and they violate the legislation of Ukraine and norms of international law, and their results are null and void. The latest developments in the zone of Russian-Ukrainian conflict have demonstrated how the security situation and peace process are fragile due to the disruptive position of the Russian Federation, its endless attempts to impose so-called direct dialogue, as well as because of the lack of political will in Moscow to implement the Minsk agreements as a signatory and a party to the conflict. The attempts of the Russian Federation to obstruct the activities of the OSCE SMM in temporary occupied territories of Ukraine are unacceptable. The blocking of and pressure on monitors of the OSCE SMM in Donetsk are part of Russia's ongoing efforts to undermine the Minsk agreements and escalate the armed conflict. It is important to recall that in September, Russia effectively terminated the mandate of OSCE Border Observer Mission at the Russian checkpoints Gukova and Donetsk, in order to prevent monitoring and hide from the international community the illegal transfer of weapons, ammunition, and mercenaries from Russia to Ukraine. We call on Russia to strictly fulfill its obligations and in particular stop provocations against international monitors of the OSCE mission, unblock their movements, ensure access to the temporary occupied territories in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and guarantee security. We urge the Russian Federation to stop its aggression against Ukraine, reverse its illegal occupation of Crimea, deoccupy certain areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and restore freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, through the Kerch Strait, and in the Sea of Azov. Russia must fully implement its commitments under the Minsk agreements, including the withdrawal of its armed force, mercenaries, armed formations, and weapons from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Thank you, colleagues.
Mr. Potorayev. Next speaker is Mr. Selami Altinok, head of the Turkish delegation. He will be followed by Mr. Andrei Savinik, head of the Belarusian delegation. Mr. Altinok, the floor is yours. Thank you.
He's waiting for the Turkish translation.
We can't hear you, Mr. Altinok. No, thank you.
Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues. First of all, I would like to convey my appreciation to all the great work of the Assembly, and I would like to personally thank Madam Sederfeld, Mr. Jensen, and Mr. Montella for their comprehensive and explanatory reports. As you know, in the international arena, what happens concerns not just one member country or one single country, but all. And therefore, when it comes to certain global challenges, such as the climate change or the irregular mobility of the human beings, which are the global problems, it is necessary to have global solidarity and cooperation, which becomes a must for us all. However, the new developments in Afghanistan once again indicate that we might be facing a new big crisis. Although it is not yet detected that there is no mass migration movement yet, there is the possibility of large number of people migrating from Afghanistan to others, and therefore it is quite obvious that the current picture can deteriorate even worse if we do not take actions before winter, and this whole situation might give birth to newer tragedies if we don't take actions before winter hits. Turkey is located on the main migration routes between the source countries and Europe. Therefore, the irregular migration pressure on Turkey, which is huge today, is even further increasing with the Afghan-oriented migration risks. Turkey currently hosts 3.7 million Syrians and a total of 4 million asylum seekers, 3.7 million of which are the Syrians. Considering all statuses of foreigners, Turkey hosts a total of more than 5 million foreigners. Therefore, Turkey has no other additional capacity to shoulder another migrant influx burden. From another point, it is not realistic or fair to expect Turkey to solve the migration problem alone. The expectation on our end is to see some burden and responsibility sharing in a fair manner in this struggle against the humanitarian crisis. However, unfortunately, I'm upset to tell you that we have not received a response to our calls up until today. Although we have fulfilled our responsibilities based on March 18th statement, European Union still has not fulfilled its responsibility, and the voluntary humanitarian admission scheme that opens a legal migration route for the Syrians has not been activated. Our common goal is to prevent the migration triggering problems in the source countries and to prepare the return conditions for the asylum seekers so that they can go back to their countries of origin safely. It is not a realistic solution to wait for the asylum seekers and the irregular migrants to be held in transit countries. This is a humanitarian problem. Therefore, the solution calls for an international solidarity. Madam Chair, in addition to this, we are looking forward to have you in Turkey with the rest of your valuable and distinguished delegation members in Turkey. It will be a great pleasure for all of us to have you and host you in Turkey. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Altinok. Yes, I do. Thank you also for your kind words about the upcoming visit to Turkey. I look forward to visit Turkey and to meet. Next speaker is Mr. Andrei Saviniki, head of the delegation to Belarus. He will be followed by Ms. Barbara Bartos, head of the Polish delegation. Mr. Andrei Saviniki, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. И уважаемые участники заседания, позвольте проинформировать вас о процессе конституционной реформы в Республике Беларусь. Прежде всего хочу отметить, что этот процесс носит открытый характер, и в него сегодня вовлечены все конструктивные политические силы, включая оппозицию, которая работает в правовом поле. Конституционные изменения затронут основополагающие элементы нашей общественно-политической системы. Поправки включают существенное перераспределение полномочий между ветвями власти, передачу части функций от главы государства правительству, парламенту и местным органам власти, ограничение сроков пребывания президента на своем посту. Планируется закрепить положение об исключительно мирном характере наших действий в сфере развития ядерной энергетики. Обсуждается возможность введения института уполномоченного по правам человека, Значительное внимание уделяется совершенствованию системы социальной и правовой защиты граждан. Конституционная реформа направлена на модернизацию политической системы, на обеспечение ее дальнейшего устойчивого существования и эволюционного развития в новых условиях. Изменения направлены как на сохранение положительного опыта, накопленного Республикой Беларусь за последние 30 лет, так и создание возможностей для дальнейшего социально-политического развития. Процесс подготовки конституционных изменений вышел на финальный этап. Сегодня группа экспертов, юристов в течение ближайших недель завершит юридическую проработку вносимых предложений, а затем документ будет вынесен на всеобщее обсуждение. Общенародное голосование по проекту новой редакции Конституции состоится в рамках референдума ориентировочно в феврале следующего года. Благодарю за внимание.
Next speaker is Ms. Barbara Bartos, head of Poland's delegation. Next, she will be followed by Ms. Vesna Markovic, head of Serbia's delegation. Ms. Barbara Bartos, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, Madam President, thank you very much, dear colleagues. At the beginning, I would like to thank Madam President Margareta Cederfeld for her visit to Poland. She met up with the Polish delegation from the Parliament, and I would like to thank you for those great conversations we had. But right now, I would like to touch on disturbing activities of Belarusian authorities, including stepped-up repressions of the society and simulating illegal migration to the EU. With great disappointment and sadness, I have witnessed recent reaction of some members of our assembly and a statement which was posted on the website of the head of ad hoc committee for migration and the Bureau of Human Rights, who, being unfamiliar with all facts, have made a very subjective assessment of my country in the context of unfolding events on the Polish-Belarusian border. Instead of putting heads together to stop and think how we, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, can react to this unprecedented hybrid attack, to what activities we can take together. Poland has fallen victim to the crisis, and it's doing its best to solve this problem in a humanitarian and peaceful way. And I would like to reiterate, we, Poland and Pole, are on the receiving end of this attack. It's a purposeful hybrid operation set up by Belarusian services, and perhaps not only Belarusian services. People who are supposedly trapped in the border area are actually located beyond Polish territory, and Poland has no legal possibilities to undertake any actions. Very differently, it is very different when those persons illegally get to Poland. Polish services have saved many lives so far, including the lives of illegal migrants who have arrived to Poland, including a woman in labor. And I would like to assure you that Poland is helping everyone who is fleeing war and persecution. We are an open country driven by democratic principles, which is fulfilling its international commitments and is driven by Christian values. Ever since the beginning of the crisis in Belarus, we have issued more than 15,000 humanitarian visas to Belarusian nationals. We are home to Belarus democratic opposition, and until recently, we have evacuated 1,300 Afghani nationals from Kabul. But a very different situation unfolds on the Polish-Belarusian border. It's not about refugees. These are migrants encouraged by Belarus who are paying hefty amounts of money to transit across Poland to Western Europe. Belarus is offering visa-free international flights and later is dispatching migrants to EU's eastern borders. The Polish government has proposed to the government of Belarus cooperation and essential humanitarian aid to be provided to people located in Belarus. Even a convoy was sent. We have offered food, water, clothing, access to toilet, medical care, and temporary shelter, but our offer has not been accepted. With great anxiety, we are witnessing more and more provocations of Belarus. Armed people in uniforms are aiming weapons at Polish border guards. Bangers are being heard, and those events unfold every night. As OSCE, we need to think what political steps we can initiate. The international community has to put pressure on the Belarusian regime to follow and respect human protection rights under international laws. Belarus is a member of OSCE and is bound to fulfill its commitments, which are systematically infringed. Detentions, arrests and persecution of opposition, of human rights defenders and journalists are happening every day, including members of Polish minority. Angelika Borys, the head of the Union of Poles in Belarus, remains arrested, and recently a Belsac television journalist Irina Slavnikova and her husband have been detained under absurd charges. We cannot stay indifferent to what is happening in Belarus and on the border with Lithuania and Poland. We cannot permit to have immigrants exploited by Belarusian services who are bringing them into the country. Winter is coming and crisis may even deepen. We have to fight for people who are stranded there. So I urge everyone in OSCE to take joint action to mitigate the crisis on the EU border with Belarus and protect the people who are prosecuted by the Belarusian regime. Thank you very much.
And I would also like to thank you for your hospitality and for the positive dialogue when we met in Poland. Thank you. Next speaker is Ms. Vesna Markovic, head of the Serbian delegation. She will be followed by Ms. Siv Moslet, head of the Norwegian delegation. Ms. Vesna Markovic, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear Ms. Sederfeld, dear colleagues, we are all aware of the fact that effects of the COVID pandemic continue to impact on our societies, all segments of our lives, and on the activities of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly as well. But despite the new circumstances, we continue to carry out our activities. I'm glad that we managed to organize our activities in the right way and that we have achieved concrete and tangible results. Mr. Montella in his report mentioned key points in our previous and future work, even though a pandemic is only an additional challenge compared to existing ones. I share with Ms. Sederfeld, our President's views on the importance of parliamentary diplomacy. It is an important element of work we do throughout the OSCE area. Debating OSCE issue within national parliaments and with governments in our countries will help all of us to be stronger and more visible. And at the end, to implement the OSCE recommendations. One one of our goals should be to build dialogue, confidence, and trust between OSCE participating states and with our partner countries. Our engagement in Afghanistan crisis is a good way to resolve existing issues. I'm a member of the OSCE ad hoc committee on migration because Serbia is at the heart of the Balkans migration road. Exchange of experience and cooperation with colleagues from other countries facing the same challenges is important for us as well. Climate change can affect on migration flows in the future as well. I think that role of Committee on Migration should be even bigger and more visible. I believe that Mr. Sederfeld, as the President of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, in cooperation with all of us, members of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, will contribute to strengthening its role. Thank you for your attention.
Ms. Markovic. Next speaker is Ms. Siv Mossleth, head of the Norwegian delegation. She will be followed by Mr. Edward Agarjanyan, from head of the Armenian delegation. Ms. Mossleth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, let me thank the President and the Secretary General and the Treasurer for their good work. I'd like to make 3 points. Firstly, let me inform you about the recent parliamentary election in Norway. We now have a new government consisting of the Labour Party and the Centre Party. I will continue as the head of the Norwegian delegation. Our delegation now consists of some old and some new members. I look forward to carry on the important work in the OSCE PA. Our main foreign policy priorities remain the same, and we will like to make a difference for a safer, more just and greener world. It's also worth noting that the new government has great ambitions for development in the High North. Our policy aims to reserve the fall in population and use local resources to stimulate growth. It will put the North at the heart of the green shift. We must remember that the Arctic is home to many people, including me. It's just as important that we have education, research, good communications, business and jobs as anywhere else. We will also make new initiatives for cooperation with our neighbors in the Arctic. Secondly, I'd like to express my continued concern about the situation in Belarus. We support the demands of the people for democracy, free and fair elections. Repressions and violence must stop, and all political prisoners must be released. I'm grateful for the dialogue that the OSCE PA has had with the opposition and Belarus delegation. This must continue. Finally, I took note of the Secretary General's speech about the importance of the environmental protections agenda, and I fully agree. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Mossleth, and congratulations for your re-election and continued responsibility as head of the Norwegian delegation. Next speaker is Mr. Edward Agarjanyan, from head of the Armenian delegation. He will be followed by Mr. Vladimir Yashaparov, acting head of the Russian delegation. And Mr. Arganiani, I will give you the floor, but first of all, congratulations for your new appointment as head of the Armenian delegation. Welcome to OSCE PA. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, dear colleagues. Allow me to greet you on the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Autumn Session. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are deprived of the opportunity to meet each other in person. But hopefully soon enough, we shall overcome all the COVID-related barriers and will gradually move back to the offline session format. As you might know, on June 20th, 2021, snap parliamentary elections were held in Armenia, which were described as democratic and legitimate by all international observers, including the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. As a result, a new parliament has been formed, hence the new delegation to OSCE-PA from Armenia, the composition of which reflects the proportion of the ruling and opposition parties presented in the newly elected Parliament of Armenia, and which I have the privilege to chair. Dear colleagues, on 27th September 2021, Armenia and Artsakh commemorated the first anniversary of the outbreak of the war by Azerbaijan with the direct support and participation of Turkey and Turkish-backed foreign terrorist fighters, which caused massive death tolls and suffering both among civilians and servicemen. Throughout the offensive, in a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law, Azerbaijani army committed horrendous crimes and atrocities, deliberately and systematically targeting civilian infrastructures, as well as vandalizing and destroying the Armenian cultural and religious heritage on the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. The trilateral statement signed on 9th of November 2020 by the leaders of Armenia, Azerbaijan and the Russian Federation on a ceasefire stopped the Azerbaijani aggression. 1 year later, however, a number of important issues contained in the statement still remain outstanding. Moreover, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not resolved because the result of the use of force, accompanied by war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law, can never become the basis for a lasting and sustainable peace. Azerbaijan openly declares that they have resolved the conflict by the use of force and have destroyed the very name of Nagorno-Karabakh. It is noteworthy that November 9th statement contains 3 references to Nagorno-Karabakh. So the claim that new realities do not include Nagorno-Karabakh is absolute false. It is worth mentioning that there is no single Armenian living in the territories that Azerbaijan took control of during the war. And now, by urging the international community not to even use the words Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan is aiming at erasing the Armenian people of the Nagorno-Karabakh under the pretext of integration. It is extremely important for this Parliamentary Assembly to show resistance to this policy because it is exactly the OSCE Minsk group that is tasked with the resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And the 3 co-chair countries, Russia, France, and the United States of America, have several times reiterated that Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not resolved yet. The conflict awaits its just resolution under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs on the basis of the well-known principles, among them the right of self-determination of the people of Artsakh. Armenia is willing to achieve lasting peace in the region, but Azerbaijan, with its provocative actions and encroachment into the sovereign territory of Armenia since May 12th this year, is trying to create new areas of tension, thus jeopardizing the efforts aimed to de-escalate the situation and undermining regional security and stability. Azerbaijan also continues to keep dozens of prisoners of war in spite of several calls to their immediate release by virtually all of the international community, thus violating all of the one of the principal points of the trilateral agreement of November 9th. And last but not least, the ongoing talks of a so-called Zangezur corridor by Azeri high officials such as Mr. Guliev himself create further unnecessary tension on the way to peaceful resolution of the conflict. I would like to invite your attention on the fact that there is no such term as Zangezur corridor in neither of the agreements signed by the parties mentioned above. Currently, the Azerbaijani authorities are trying to project an image of Azerbaijan as a peace-loving nation for consumption by the international community. However, the aggressive rhetoric and hatred towards Armenia and Armenians continue. President Aliyev repeatedly makes territorial claims against Armenia, in particular the Syunik province of Armenia, calling it historical Azerbaijani land and promising to force Armenia to open the so-called corridor mentioned above. Dear colleagues, it is the conviction of the international community, as well as the Parliamentary Assembly, that the use of force has never been and never will be a sustainable means of conflict resolution. Hence, I am certain that it is only through dialogues and debates backed by evidence, facts, and logic can we come to a mutual understanding, regardless of how hard of a process it might seem. And I believe that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is one of the most prominent platforms for such discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agayanyan. Next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Jasabarov, acting head of the Russian delegation. He will be followed by Vice President Pascal Alisard, from also chairperson from the Mediterranean Forum and from France. Mr. Vladimir Jasabarov, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Спасибо, госпожа Садерфельд. Мы рассматриваем парламентскую ассамблею ОБСЕ как площадку для равноправного межпарламентского диалога по ключевым проблемам общей европейской безопасности. Вместе с тем считаем недопустимым использовать конфронтационную риторику и принятие политизированных резолюций на сессиях парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ. Необходимо покончить с порочной практикой использования ассамблеи для тиражирования беспочвенных обвинений и выдвижения предвзятых резолюций против отдельных стран. Вынуждены констатировать, что 29-я ежегодная сессия парламентской ассамблеи, которая состоялась летом этого года, в очередной раз целенаправленно использовалась для нападок в адрес нашей страны. В ходе сессии были неоднократно допущены грубые нарушения правил процедуры ассамблеи. После нескольких выступлений руководителя российской делегации, заместителя председателя Госдумы Петра Толстого с разъяснениями нарушения регламента и настойчивыми призывами перейти от конфронтации к диалогу, российская делегация была вынуждена покинуть заседание. С большим сожалением отмечаем, что представитель украинской делегации уже много лет целенаправленно использует площадку парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ для безосновательных враждебных выпадов в адрес России. Они рассматривают эту организацию не как организацию по безопасности и сотрудничеству, а как организацию по конфронтации и разжиганию вражды в Европе. Руководитель украинской делегации призывает Россию обеспечить одно, выполнить другое, сделать третье и так далее. Круг требований огромен. Со своей стороны Россия призывает только к одному – безусловному выполнению Украины Минских соглашений, под которыми стоит подпись бывшего президента Порошенко и который обещал выполнить действующий президент Зеленский. Уважаемые коллеги, рассчитываю, что в рамках парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ наконец возобладает конструктивный диалог, будет налажено взаимоуважительное межпарламентское взаимодействие. Со своей стороны мы готовы сообща вырабатывать системные ответы на общие вызовы, противодействовать реальным, а не надуманным угрозам. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Jashaparov. Next speaker is Mr. Vice President Pascal Alisard. After that, I will give the floor to Vice President Asai Guliev because he was mentioned before. Vice President Pascal Alisard, the floor is yours. We can't hear you.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez là?
Oui.
Yes, oui.
Parfait. Oui, bonjour à toutes et à tous et heureux de vous retrouver, même si je crois on aurait tous préféré se retrouver en présentiel, mais c'est bien comme ça. Je souhaitais intervenir très rapidement sur deux points. Le premier point, mais Madame la Présidente, vous en avez un peu parlé, c'est la tenue demain matin du Forum méditerranéen de 10h à midi. Et je voulais attirer l'attention de tous mes collègues chefs de délégation pour leur dire que ce Forum méditerranéen, en fait, ne concerne pas que les pays riverains de la Méditerranée, mais concerne l'ensemble des pays membres de l'espace OSCE. Je suis, comme chacun d'entre nous, les échanges qui ont lieu actuellement, et on voit bien qu'un certain nombre de tensions à l'intérieur de l'espace OSCE restent vives et fortes, et notre devoir est d'en parler et d'essayer de trouver des solutions tous ensemble. Mais j'attire aussi votre attention sur le fait que la sécurité à l'intérieur de l'espace OSCE dépend aussi de ce qui se passe à l'extérieur. Et ce qui se passe en Méditerranée est un point extrêmement important. Ce sera le sujet de nos échanges de demain matin. Et Madame la Présidente, mes chers collègues, je voulais aussi attirer votre attention sur ce qui se passe actuellement en Birmanie. Vous allez me dire, la Birmanie, c'est loin, c'est pas l'espace OSCE, mais ce qui s'y passe est très grave et n'est pas forcément neutre pour notre espace OSCE. Voilà, je ne vais pas développer plus longtemps pour ne pas monopoliser la parole, mais je souhaiterais que nous puissions ensemble réfléchir à ce sujet, car c'est un pays important, c'est un pays multiculturel. Vous avez aujourd'hui un gouvernement en exil où toutes les catégories de population se retrouvent, et notamment toutes les catégories confessionnelles. C'est assez rare pour être souligné. Et c'est un pays démocratique qui est en train de rebasculer dans la dictature. Voilà, je souhaiterais qu'on puisse y réfléchir et peut-être prendre une initiative. L'OSCE, c'est certes la sécurité de son espace intérieur, mais c'est aussi se préoccuper de ce qui se passe à l'extérieur. Bonne soirée et j'aurai plaisir à vous retrouver demain.
Much, Vice President Ali Saad, and thank you as well for the invitation for the Mediterranean Forum, which starts 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, as well as for reminding us about the importance of also the area outside of the OSCE region. Next speaker will be Vice President Asay Guliev, as he was apostrophed earlier. And I will give Vice President Guliev 1 minute to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. To be honest, I had a little anticipation that new head of the Armenian delegation will be much more constructive and will be in line with the language of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and we stop making groundless accusations, even though I would say some blackmailing. But unfortunately, we witnessed on contrary, but I do hope that our Armenian colleague will take necessary lesson from the parliamentary language and to be in line with really reality. But what concerns some, Madam President, some unnecessary and groundless accusation as if Azerbaijan has a territorial claims against Armenia, as you know, it is really, really incorrect, and it doesn't make any sense. What Azerbaijan president says and offers to have the reconciliation and the peace with Armenia, because we do believe that it is really the matter that the conflict has over, and any attempt by Armenia to bring obsolete and outdated concept to the table is meaningless. It doesn't work. What concerns the Zangezur corridor, Madam President, we have to understand one thing, that the Prime Minister of Armenia, Mr. Pashinyan, signed the trilateral agreement which envisages the opening communication between Armenia, Azerbaijan, including the exclaves of Autonomic National Republic, which will connect with the rest of the Azerbaijan. I don't want to even comment the other things concerning mercenaries and other really ridiculous accusations. Madam President, I don't want to waste the time and to comment on these unserious accusations. But one last sentence, I would say that Azerbaijan never needed any type of support from outside including mercenary. Azerbaijan has a quite capable army, which showed in the battlefield, and 44 days, Azerbaijan managed to defeat Armenia and they liberate our territories. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President Asay Guliev. If Mr. Aganyan wants to have 1 minute replique, you are welcome.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to state that I believe that none of my language has not been out of the Parliamentary Assembly Code of Conduct. If it has been, I have no intention to assault any of our colleagues. One thing I would like to express, which is, I believe, one of the most important things and one of the biggest differences in the perception of the both sides of this conflict, is the post-war status quo, which presumably both of the sides are trying to or are stating that are going to a long-term peace and are for going to the long peace process. But in fact, the actions on the ground that we see from our Azerbaijani side are quite the opposite. And this is the main point that I would like to state, because Armenia has been in line with all the rhetoric that we have been sticking to, and Azerbaijan has not. And that is a fact, and I would like this to be announced. I would like that our colleagues of the Parliamentary Assembly know that Azerbaijan has a big gap between their rhetoric and their action. And this is a problem which we have to address together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Aganyan. And by this, I will close the debate for number 5, the review of the OSCE PA activities and current international political issues.
Ukraine is asking for the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just before I start to close, the Ukrainian delegation,
Mr. Potorayev.
Mr. Potorayev have requested for the floor, and as it's not 5 o'clock, I will give him the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President and colleagues. I will be very economy in time. As Mr. Jabarov said about constructive dialogue and discussion, I would like to remind to all colleagues that Vice President of Russian Duma and head of Russian delegation in OSCE PA, Mr. Petr Tolstoy, it was 9th of July. He said that Ukraine is a part of Russia, and he said that all Ukrainian authorities, so including me personally, all Ukrainian authorities, started with president and till all MPs, Ukrainian MPs and other authorities, should be executed. So I don't think that it's an example of constructive discussion and diplomacy and parliamentary language. So we hope that Russian delegation also will remember about rules of political civilized discussion. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potorayev. And by this, I close number 5. But I would also like to say thank you to all participants in this debate. I think all your interventions have been very important and fruitful, and I am really proud to be president of an assembly with such high quality and engagement of all the delegations. Thank you very much. And now let's move further on to number 6, information on upcoming meetings of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in 2022. I look forward to welcoming members of our bureau in Stockholm on 1st December before the Ministerial Council meeting, which will take place the 2nd and 3rd of December. We look forward to returning to Vienna on 24th and 25th February 2022 for our winter meeting. And I really hope, as it looks now, that it will be in-person meeting. From 2 to 6 July 2022, our annual session will be hosted by the United Kingdom in Birmingham. Our autumn meeting will be hosted by Bulgaria. We thank these delegations for their support in hosting our assembly. We also thank delegations that had planned for meetings cancelled by the pandemic and that have offered to host meetings in 2023 onwards. We look forward to our 2023 annual session in Vancouver, Canada, and our 2024 annual session in Bucharest, Romania. We will also be in Dublin 2024 for our autumn meeting, following discussions in Tashkent last week. I hope that we can organize 2023 autumn meeting in Uzbekistan. And for those of you who are interested to hold a forum, please get in touch with Secretary General Roberto Montella. Any questions or comments on this? No, thank you. Then I close number 6. Number 7, other business. I would like to remind you, as Vice President Pascal Alisard is, about tomorrow's Mediterranean Forum, 10 to 12. It will be followed by the Parliamentarian Conference on the theme Current Security Challenges, focused on Afghanistan, between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So look forward to see you tomorrow, and thank you very much, dear members of the Standing Committee. I close today's Standing Committee by this. Thank you.
Very good.